The man ties a heavy stone to the donkey and throws it straight into the sea. The donkey struggles desperately but cannot move, and soon swarms of fish tear into it and devour it. Suddenly, the people on the shore spot a puppet in the water. They desperately shout for him to come back to shore, but the puppet simply waves his hand and keeps walking deeper into the sea. The next second, a giant horn shark suddenly rises from the depths and swallows the puppet whole. A few weeks earlier, an old carpenter picks out a fine piece of wood and prepares to carve it. The next second, the piece of wood suddenly moves on its own, frightening the old carpenter so badly that he collapses to the floor. He gives the strange piece of wood to a poor and struggling carpenter named Geppetto. Geppetto excitedly takes the wood home, planning to carve a puppet to keep him company in his loneliness. As the puppet is almost finished, Geppetto begins teaching him to say Papa. The next second, the puppet actually repeats the word. Geppetto is terrified by what he sees, but he excitedly runs into the yard and loudly tells the neighbors the good news that he now has a son. The next day, he makes the puppet some proper clothes and names him Pinocchio. Mischievous Pinocchio gets tired from running around and falls asleep beside the fireplace. When he wakes up, he discovers that his feet have been burned away. His father, Geppetto, is both angry and heartbroken. After repairing his feet, he decides to send Pinocchio to school. But the naughty Pinocchio secretly sneaks out of school and runs into a puppet theater to watch a performance. The theater manager, Mangiafuoco, notices that Pinocchio can move without strings, so he takes him away. When school lets out, Geppetto comes to pick up his son, only to discover that Pinocchio is nowhere to be found. From the neighbors, he learns that Pinocchio may have been taken by the puppet theater. Panicked over losing his son, Geppetto makes up his mind to find Pinocchio no matter what. Meanwhile, the theater manager is unhappy because the mutton is not cooking properly and decides to burn the puppets as firewood. Pinocchio jumps forward to plead for the puppet's life, even offering to sacrifice himself and take his companion's place as firewood. Moved by Pinocchio's kindness, the theater manager gives him 5 gold coins the next day and tells him to go home and find his father. On his way home, Pinocchio meets a fox and a cat. When they learn that he has 5 gold coins, they come up with a wicked plan. They tell Pinocchio that if he buries the coins in the ground, a money tree will grow. The two successfully fool the innocent Pinocchio. Following their instructions, Pinocchio arrives at the spot that night. At that moment, the cricket appears again and warns Pinocchio not to fall for their trick. But Pinocchio refuses to listen. As he walks along, 2 masked men suddenly appear and demand that Pinocchio hand over his coins. They are actually the fox and the cat in disguise. Pinocchio quickly runs away. Luckily, he spots a large house nearby and desperately pounds on the door, crying for help. A girl soon appears at the window, but she tells him she cannot open the door for him. Just then, the villains catch up. Wanting the coins hidden inside Pinocchio's mouth, they hang him from a tree and wait for him to stop breathing so they can take the coins. Pinocchio deeply regrets not listening to his father. Just as Pinocchio is on the verge of death, a servant sent by the Blue Fairy discovers him and rescues him. Pinocchio is taken to a castle, where he meets a snail butler and a lovely little fairy. Whenever the little fairy asks him a question, Pinocchio lies, but every time he tells a lie, his nose grows a little longer. As his lies make his nose grow longer and longer, Pinocchio becomes completely bewildered. The fairy opens the window and calls in a group of woodpeckers, who peck away his extra long nose bit by bit until it soon returns to normal. The two become good friends, but Pinocchio still decides to go back and find his father. When he returns home, however, the house is completely empty. A neighbor tells Pinocchio that his father has crossed the sea to the other side of the water to search for him. After hearing this, Pinocchio ignores everyone's warnings and recklessly dives into the sea. But because he cannot swim, he can only drift with the current and is eventually washed ashore. At that moment, a woman wearing a cloak appears and picks Pinocchio up. When he wakes up, he finds himself lying in bed. To his surprise, the snail butler is there too. It turns out that the Blue Fairy is the one who rescued him, but the fairy has now grown into an adult, making her seem completely unfamiliar to Pinocchio. Once his body fully recovers, Pinocchio says that he wants to become an adult too. The fairy tells him that a puppet cannot grow up unless he becomes a real human child. If he wants to make that wish come true, he has to go to school and study hard. Pinocchio immediately agrees. For the first few days, he takes school seriously, but he is soon drawn in by a mischievous boy named Lampwick. Before school even ends, Pinocchio follows him out of the classroom. The two steal some bread from other people, then climb onto a high rooftop and happily feast together. This time, Pinocchio finally has a new friend, but when he returns home, he is punished. The fairy makes him sleep outside for one night. At dawn, The butler opens the door and tells him that the fairy forgives him this time, but he must not do it again. Pinocchio has no choice but to return to class and behave himself. In school, he wonders why his friend has not shown up. His classmates tell him that Lampwick has dropped out. Pinocchio feels deeply disappointed and can only focus on his studies. Because he takes his lessons seriously, the clever Pinocchio improves rapidly and earns praise from his teacher. The fairy then decides to keep her promise and tells him that she will turn him into a human child the following night. Pinocchio eagerly looks forward to it, but the very next day, he suddenly sees his friend Lampwick again. Pinocchio excitedly tells him the good news. Lampwick, however, invites him to go to Pleasure Island that night, saying they can have as much fun as they want there. Pinocchio hesitates, but when he sees a group of donkeys pulling a wagon packed with other boys, he can no longer resist the temptation and climbs aboard. After arriving at Pleasure Island, they have the time of their lives, but the next day, they suddenly grow donkey ears. Their hands and feet begin changing as well, and before long they turn into donkeys. The coachman sells them off. While Pinocchio is performing a ring of fire at a circus, he unfortunately breaks his leg. His owner has no choice but to abandon him and throw him into the sea. A school of small fish gathers around him, and in an instant, they transform him back into his puppet form. The owner is stunned. Pinocchio pays no attention and swims toward the open sea. He swims for a long time, until a giant shark suddenly appears behind him. He desperately tries to escape, but the shark swallows him whole. Inside the pitch-black belly of the fish, Pinocchio meets a dejected tuna. After being trapped there for several months, the tuna has completely lost the will to resist. It even tells Pinocchio to accept his fate because there is simply no way out. Pinocchio ignores him and bravely heads toward a faint light in the distance. As he gets closer, he discovers that it is his father, Geppetto, who has been searching for him. It turns out that his father has also been swallowed by the giant shark while looking for him. Father and son embrace tightly. Once they calm down, Geppetto comforts his son and tells him not to be afraid. The two of them can survive inside the shark's belly, but Pinocchio knows this cannot last forever. After everything he has been through, he has become a brave child, and he insists on escaping with his father. When they carefully make their way toward the shark's mouth, they discover that the shark is sleeping with its mouth wide open. They decide to escape while they have the chance, but Geppetto backs down again because he cannot swim. Pinocchio tells him that he is made of wood and can carry both of their weight, then leads his father out of the shark. However, he overestimates his own buoyancy, and Pinocchio soon becomes unable to keep them afloat. Just as he struggles desperately in the water, the tuna suddenly appears beside them. It has been inspired by Pinocchio's positive spirit. With the tuna's help, father and son move forward at incredible speed without any effort. After carrying them safely to shore, the tuna says goodbye and leaves them. They arrive in a small town, but Geppetto is extremely weak. Worried about his father, Pinocchio goes to a farm, where the farmer agrees to give him food in exchange for his labor. During the day, he works at the farm, turning the mill to earn goat's milk. At night, he studies hard. After working under the sun for so long, cracks begin to appear across his wooden face. But for his father, every hardship is worth it. One day, while feeding the goats, he sees the fairy again. The fairy is deeply moved by his kindness and hard work. Pinocchio hugs the fairy tightly, and she uses her magic to make him fall asleep. When he wakes up, he discovers that he has truly become a human child. Pinocchio is overjoyed and immediately runs home as fast as he can. When his father, Geppetto, sees Pinocchio, he is overwhelmed with happiness, and father and son embrace tightly. Pinocchio has transformed from a mischievous troublemaker into an obedient and devoted son, and all those hardships are simply the price he has to pay to grow up.